The rain-slicked streets of Palermo gleamed under the sodium lights, a labyrinth of narrow alleys where the scent of sea salt mingled with the sharp tang of espresso from corner cafes. Vespa engines buzzed like angry hornets, weaving through the evening rush, while distant church bells tolled a somber rhythm. In the heart of the old market district, where vendors hawked everything from fresh arancini to knockoff leather bags, stood a modest cart painted in faded pastels. Behind it, a young woman named Sofia Rossi arranged trays of handmade sweets, cannoli dusted with powdered sugar, marzipan fruits glistening like jewels, and nougat bars wrapped in wax paper. At 25, Sofia's dark curls were tied back with a simple ribbon, her apron stained with chocolate from a long day. She wasn't here for profit. The coins in her tin were just a means to an end. Across the square, in the shadowed balcony of a Renaissance-era palazzo, now converted into offices, Lorenzo De Luca watched the world below with the cold precision of a hawk. At 38, he ruled Palermo's underworld not with brute force alone, but with an ironclad network of logistics, shipping routes disguised as legitimate imports, discreet ledgers tracking every favor owed. His family had built an empire on olive oil and construction, but everyone knew the real cargo moved under cover of night, whispers of protection rackets, rival enforcers vanishing into the Tyrrhenian Sea. Lorenzo's jaw tightened as he sipped his grappa, his dark eyes narrowing on the market. The square was his territory, every vendor paying a subtle tithe for the peace his men enforced. But this new cart? It hadn't cleared with his lieutenant. Unlicensed, unvetted, a potential foothold for rivals sniffing around his docks. He descended the spiral staircase, his polished loafers echoing on the marble, flanked by 2 silent bodyguards in tailored suits. The air grew thicker with the aroma of frying dough and blooming jasmine from nearby planters as he approached. Sofia glanced up, her hazel eyes widening slightly at the trio cutting through the thinning crowd. She wiped her hands on her apron, forcing a polite smile. "Buonasera, signore. Would you like to try a cannoli? Fresh this morning." Lorenzo stopped short, his presence alone enough to hush nearby chatter. He towered over the cart, his cologne, a subtle mix of sandalwood and citrus, cutting through the sugary haze. "This spot is taken," he said, his voice low and gravelly, laced with Sicilian inflection. "Who gave you permission to set up here?" Sofia's smile faltered, but she held her ground, the chill from the cobblestones seeping through her thin shoes. She'd chosen this corner deliberately, high foot traffic, close to the hospital where her shifts ended late. Selling sweets wasn't her dream. It was survival. Her brother, Marco, lay in a coma 3 blocks away, tubes snaking from his arms after a freak warehouse collapse that reeked of sabotage, medical bills piled up like storm debris, and the family's olive grove up north barely scraped by. "Permission?" she echoed, keeping her tone even. "The market's open to everyone. I pay the city fee." One of his men shifted, hand brushing his jacket where a holster hid. Lorenzo's gaze flicked to the cart's meager display, then back to her face. Defiance in a woman like this, pretty, unassuming, irritated him more than outright rebellion. It disrupted the order he maintained, the invisible web that kept his operations humming without police interference. "Everyone knows the rules in Palermo," he replied, leaning in just enough to make the air between them tense. "You either talk to Vito, or you pack up. Now." The market's hum faded around them, vendors averting eyes, sensing the shift like animals before a quake. Sofia's heart pounded, but she thought of Marco's pale face under the fluorescent lights, the beeping monitors that demanded another payment by week's end. She couldn't afford to fold. "These aren't just sweets," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her fingers. "They're for the hospital, for families like mine. If I move, I lose the day." Lorenzo paused, his expression unchanging, but something in her words snagged, a flicker of the personal code he lived by. Never harm the innocent, protect the vulnerable, even if it meant bending his own rules. His mother had drilled that into him after his father's accident years ago, a betrayal that left scars deeper than the ones on his knuckles. He scanned her card again, noting the handwritten labels, the care in each twist of dough. Not a rival plant, too earnest, too desperate. Hospital? He repeated, the word hanging like smoke. Sophia nodded, meeting his stare. Rain pattered harder on the awning above, dripping onto the street in rhythmic plinks. My brother's hurt. Bad. I work nights as a nurse, sell these during the day. It's all we've got. She didn't beg. Pride wouldn't let her. But the truth spilled out, raw and unfiltered, the weight of it pressing on her chest. Lorenzo's men exchanged glances, but he raised a hand, silencing them. He studied her, the faint shadows under her eyes, the calluses on her hands from both syringe and spoon. In his world, vulnerability was a weapon, but this felt different, genuine. A distant car horn blared, and he caught a glimpse of a black sedan idling at the square's edge, too still to be casual. Surveillance? His own paranoia, or something else? "What's his name?" he asked abruptly. "Marco Rossi," she said, surprise softening her edges. "Why?" Lorenzo didn't answer immediately. The rain intensified, turning the square into a mosaic of reflections. He pulled a card from his pocket, plain stock, embossed with a discreet crest, and slid it across the cart. "Vito will handle your spot. No fee. But tomorrow, you come to my office. We talk about this brother of yours." Sophia stared at the card, her pulse racing. It was an invitation laced with command, pulling her into shadows she knew better than to enter. As his men melted back into the crowd, Lorenzo turned, his silhouette cutting through the downpour. But who was watching the watcher? The sedan now pulling away, or the faint outline of a figure on a nearby rooftop, phone pressed to ear? The market exhaled as he vanished, but Sophia's unease lingered, the card heavy in her palm like a promise, or a trap. What did a man like DeLuca want with a nurse and her comatose brother? The next morning dawned gray over Palermo, the sky a bruised canopy that mirrored the city's underbelly. Sophia Rossi pushed through the hospital's revolving doors, the sterile tang of antiseptic clashing with the faint sweetness still clinging to her skin from the dawn's baking. Her shift as a nurse stretched ahead, changing dressings, monitoring vitals, whispering encouragements to patients who might never wake. But her mind wandered to the card tucked in her apron pocket, its edges worn from overnight fidgeting. Lorenzo DeLuca's name stared back at her in embossed black, an address in the Vucceria district that screamed old money and older secrets. Why summon her? Gratitude for her honesty? Or leverage over a desperate sister? By midday, the hospital corridors buzzed with the low hum of fluorescent lights and muffled paging announcements. Sophia paused outside Marco's room, peering through the glass panel. Her brother lay still, his chest rising in shallow rhythm under the ventilator's steady whoosh. Tubes fed him nutrients. Monitors beeped a monotonous vigil. The collapse at the warehouse, officially a structural failure, had crushed his legs and left him in limbo. Whispers among the workers hinted at cut corners, maybe even sabotage by a rival firm eyeing the DeLuca shipping lanes. But proof? Buried under bureaucracy and fear. She squeezed the door handle, steeling herself. One more shift, then the meeting. Curiosity burned hotter than caution. If DeLuca could help with the bills, or uncover what really happened to Marco, she'd risk the shadows. As her break ended, Sophia's phone vibrated. A burner model she'd bought cheap, its screen cracked from a fall. An unknown number. Be at the address by 7. A car will wait. No signature, but the implication was clear. She deleted the message, heart quickening. Surveillance? Paranoia, perhaps, but Palermo bred it like mold in the humid alleys. Slipping the phone away, she caught a glimpse of a man in the lobby, nursing a coffee too long, his eyes flicking toward the nurse's station. Coincidence, or one of DeLuca's watchers? Evening fell with a vengeance. the sun dipping behind Mount Pellegrino, casting long shadows over the Vucciria. The district pulsed with life. Street performers strumming mandolins, the sizzle of Panel frying in oil, laughter spilling from trattorias. Sophia navigated the crowds in her simple black dress, the one she'd worn to her mother's funeral 2 years back. Practical flats splashed through shallow puddles from an afternoon drizzle, her curls pinned loosely against the rising humidity. The address led to a nondescript palazzo facade, its iron balconies draped in ivy that hid security cameras like watchful eyes. A black Mercedes idled at the curb, tinted windows reflecting the neon glow of a nearby bar. The driver, a stocky man with a scarred cheek, nodded as she approached. No words. He simply opened the rear door. The leather seats enveloped her like a vice, cool and unyielding, scented with polish and faint tobacco. The car pulled away smoothly, weaving through traffic toward the waterfront. Sophia's fingers twisted in her lap, the engine's purr underscoring her isolation. "Where are we going?" she asked, voice cutting the silence. The driver met her eyes in the rear view. "Signor De Luca's place. Private dinner. Relax. You're safe." His tone was neutral, but the radio crackled softly, garbled Italian. Coordinates, perhaps. She leaned back, scanning the side mirrors. A gray Fiat trailed 2 cars back, its plates mud-spattered, driver obscured by a cap. Routine Palermo traffic or a shadow? The thought gnawed, echoing the unease from the market square. They arrived at a gated villa on the outskirts, overlooking the Tyrrhenian Sea. Waves crashed against the rocks below, their roar mingling with the distant hum of cargo ships docking at the harbor. The estate sprawled behind high walls topped with razor wire, floodlights sweeping the gravel drive like search beams. Security men patrolled discreetly, earpieces glinting, their steps crunching in sync. The driver escorted her through a side entrance, past a kitchen alive with clattering pots and the aroma of simmering ragu, tomato, garlic, basil weaving through the salt air. Up a marble staircase, lined with portraits of stern De Luca ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow her ascent. Lorenzo waited in a study overlooking the sea, the room a blend of antique oak bookshelves and modern steel safe, his world in miniature. He stood by a window, backlit by the fading twilight, a glass of red wine in hand. At 38, his frame filled the tailored shirt, broad shoulders hinting at the power that commanded loyalty without a shout. "Sophia," he said, turning with a nod that was neither warm nor cold. "You came. Good." She stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind her like a lock engaging. The space smelled of aged leather and sea brine, a fire crackling in the hearth despite the mild evening. "I almost didn't," she admitted, chin lifting. "But Marco, if you know something about the accident..." He gestured to a chair opposite a low table set for 2, candles flickering shadows across crystal stemware. "Sit. Eat first. Questions later." A maid appeared silently, serving plates of antipasti, olives, prosciutto, fresh mozzarella, before vanishing. Lorenzo poured her wine, his movements precise, watching her over the rim of his glass. "Your brother, Marco Rossi, worked the loading docks for Greco Imports, yes? Under my oversight." Sophia's fork paused mid-air, the briny olive forgotten. "Oversight?" The word dripped with implication. "He was just a laborer, saving for the family grove. What does that have to do with you?" Lorenzo's eyes darkened, the sea's murmur underscoring his pause. He set down his glass, leaning forward. "Everything in Palermo connects, Sophia. Greco's been skimming, rerouting shipments, pocketing from my roots. The collapse? No accident. A message. Or a cover." He slid a folder across the table, its contents spilling slightly. Grainy photos of warehouse schematics, a shipping manifest with circled discrepancies, a burner phone log time-stamped the night before the incident. "Your brother saw something. Refused to sign off on a falsified ledger. Now he's silent." Her breath caught, piecing it together. The inconsistencies Marco had mentioned in vague calls, the sudden hospital transfer. But why show her? Trust or bait? And you? Why help now? Because of my cart? A ghost of a smile touched his lips, gone in an instant. The cart was nothing, but innocence caught in the gears. That's personal. His voice lowered, gravelly with memory. Lost my father to a similar accident. Vowed no more. My code, protect what's mine, even if it means war. The words hung heavy, pulling her deeper into his orbit. Possessiveness laced his gaze, not crude, but a quiet claim. Autonomy clashing against the safety he offered. Outside, thunder rumbled, rain lashing the windows like impatient fingers. Sophia glanced at the folder, her nurse's instincts warring with fear. Clues stared back. A partial plate number from a delivery truck, a guard's name crossed out. But as lightning flashed, illuminating the garden below, she spotted it. A figure in the tree line, phone raised, snapping photos. Not DeLuca's man, too furtive, retreating into the storm. "Who's out there?" she whispered, pulse spiking. Lorenzo followed her gaze, his body tensing like a coiled spring. He rose swiftly, crossing to the window, hand instinctively brushing his belt. "Stay here." But the shadow vanished into the downpour, leaving only questions. Was it Greco's scout? Or someone closer, testing the boss's new interest? And how deep did the betrayal run, with Sophia now entangled in the web? The storm battered the villa's windows like a vengeful fist, rain sheeting down in relentless waves that blurred the line between sea and sky. Lorenzo DeLuca moved like a shadow, his hand slipping under his jacket to grip the cool metal of a Beretta. Discreet, always within reach in his world of calculated risks. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs, the folder's papers scattering across the table as she rose, the metallic tang of fear mixing with the room's lingering scent of garlic and wine. "What if it's one of yours?" she whispered, her voice barely cutting through the thunder's growl. "Testing me." He shot her a glance over his shoulder, eyes sharp as shattered glass. "My men don't hide in bushes. Stay put. Lock the door behind me." The study door swung open with a creak, admitting a gust of damp air that fluttered the curtains. Lorenzo vanished into the hallway, his footsteps fading into the villa's depths, swallowed by the hum of a generator kicking in as lights flickered overhead. Sophia bolted the door, her palms slick, backing toward the window. The tree line whipped in the wind, branches clawing at the night like desperate fingers. No sign of the figure now, but the unease coiled tighter. Had it been a photographer from Greco's crew, documenting DeLuca's guest for leverage? Or worse, an inside leak, someone in his own rank sniffing for weakness. Minutes stretched into an eternity, the fire's crackle the only sound besides the storm's fury. Sophia's mind raced, piecing the folder's clues. The manifest showed a truck from Greco Imports rerouted on the night of Marco's collapse, plates ending in 47Z. Common enough, but circled in red ink. A guard's name, Paolo something, struck through like a death sentence. Human error or deliberate sabotage? Her nurse's training kicked in. Assess, act. But here, action meant stepping into the unknown. She pocketed her phone. The burners weighed a small anchor and edged toward the desk, rifling for anything more. A ledger peeked from a drawer, its pages filled with coded entries, shipments of olives, masking contraband, debts tallied in subtle shorthand. One line jumped out, Marco's name, linked to a payout that never cleared. "Witness," it read, followed by a question mark. A sharp rap at the door jolted her. "Sophia, it's me." Lorenzo's voice, low and urgent. She unbolted it, and he slipped inside, rain dripping from his hair, jacket darkened at the shoulders. No gun visible now, but tension etched his face, jaw clenched like forged steel. "Gone. Slipped into the service road, my patrols sweeping the perimeter." He crossed to the window, scanning the darkness, the floodlights below cutting swaths through the downpour like accusatory beams. "You saw a phone? Flash?" She nodded, handing him the ledger page she'd glimpsed. "This. Marco's listed as a witness. To what? And that truck, 47Z. If it's Greco, why target my brother?" He was nobody. Lorenzo took the page, his fingers brushing hers, a fleeting warmth amid the chill seeping through the glass. He studied it, the firelight casting hollows under his eyes. "Nobody to you. To them, a loose end. Greco's been pushing into my docks, faking manifests to siphon cargo, cigarettes, worse. Your brother logged a discrepancy, refused the bribe. The collapse pinned it on faulty beams, but I know better. Institutional limits, they call it. Cops look the other way for a cut." His voice roughened, laced with the gravel of old wounds. "My father died like that, betrayed by a partner who thought blood was thinner than greed. I swore. No innocents pay the price. Not on my watch." Sophia searched his face, the possessiveness in his stance pulling at her like the tide below. Safety offered, but at what cost to her independence? She was no damsel. She'd clawed through nursing school on scholarships and shifts, kept the family grove alive after their mother's passing. Yet here, in this web of ledgers and shadows, his code resonated, a vow echoing her own fierce loyalty to Marco. "And me? Am I collateral now, because I wouldn't fold at the cart?" He set the page down, stepping closer, the space between them charged like the storm outside. "You're not collateral. You're unexpected." His gaze held hers, intense, revealing the push-pull of his world, autonomy clashing with the urge to shield. "I could send you away, wipe this clean. But if Greco's watching, they'll use you to draw me out. Stay under my protection, at least until we trace that plate." The offer hung heavy, autonomy warring with the fear gnawing at her edges. Rain lashed harder, a distant siren wailing through the night. Police or an ambulance? Palermo's pulse, indifferent to their drama. Sophia glanced at the window, spotting headlights piercing the tree line. A convoy of De Luca's men, tires crunching gravel as they fanned out. But in the rear view of the lead car, a flicker, another tail, gray Fiat weaving through the gates before they sealed. False alarm or infiltration? "I'll help," she said finally, voice steady despite the tremor. "For Marco, but on my terms, no strings." Lorenzo's lips quirked, a rare crack in the armor. "Terms in my world? Bold." He poured them fresh wine, the liquid swirling like blood in the crystal. They sat, poring over the clues by firelight. The manifest timestamps aligning with Marco's last shift. A burner call logged to an untraceable number. Behavioral tells emerged. Paolo, the struck guard, had switched shifts abruptly, his loyalty bought cheap. As thunder rolled, Lorenzo's radio buzzed, his lieutenant's voice clipped. "Perimeter clear, boss. But the service road cameras jammed. Sabotage?" Sophia's pulse spiked. Jamming? Simple tech glitch from the storm? Or deliberate? Someone inside disabling surveillance to let the intruder slip away? Lorenzo's hand tightened on the radio, his eyes meeting hers with a shared resolve. The night deepened, the villa's walls closing in like a safe house turned cage. But as the convoy's engines faded into the roar of waves, a new shadow loomed. What if the real threat wasn't outside, but woven into the very ledgers they now trusted? If you're enjoying this story so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. The storm's fury eased into a relentless drizzle by midnight, the Tyrrhenian sea churning below the villa like a cauldron stirred by unseen hands. Sophia Rossi stood by the study's window, the chill seeping through the glass and prickling her skin, while Lorenzo De Luca paced the Persian rug, his radio clipped silent for now. The fire had dwindled to embers, casting erratic shadows that danced across the ledgers and photos strewn on the table. The jammed camera gnawed at them both, A simple power surge from the thunder, or a deliberate cut by someone who knew the villa's blind spots. Lorenzo's men had swept the grounds twice, their flashlights slicing through the wet foliage like knives. But the intruder had melted away, leaving only boot prints in the mud that could belong to anyone. "Paolo," Lorenzo muttered, flipping through the ledger again, his finger tracing the struck-out name. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth wafting in from the cracked window and the faint, acrid bite of extinguished candles. He was on the warehouse rotation that night. Switched with a rookie last minute. Said his kid was sick. Bullshit. His voice was a low rumble, edged with the controlled anger that had built his empire. Shipments rerouted through hidden coves, rivals bought off or buried in bureaucratic quicksand. But this close to home, it felt personal, a crack in the code he'd sworn to uphold. No innocents dragged into the crossfire, no family torn apart like his own had been. Sophia leaned against the oak bookshelf, arms crossed to ward off the night's intrusion. Her black dress clung slightly from the humidity, a reminder of how quickly she'd been pulled from the market's bustle into this gilded cage. Autonomy clashed with the gratitude bubbling beneath her fear. Lorenzo's protection was a lifeline for Marco's bills. But it came wrapped in possession, his gaze lingering like a claim staked in the dark. If Paolo's the leak, why tip you off now? And that Fiat tailing the car earlier. Plates starting with GR for Greco. It's all connected, but how deep? She wasn't naive. Nursing had taught her to read vital signs, the subtle tells of pain hidden behind bravado. Lorenzo's tension showed in the tick at his jaw, the way his free hand flexed as if itching for action. He stopped pacing, meeting her eyes with that piercing intensity, the sea's distant crash underscoring the pause. Deep enough to hit your brother. Marco logged the manifest tweak. Extra crates marked for export that never left the docks. Cigarettes, maybe worse, funneled to the mainland. He called it in anonymously, but the burner trace leads back to a payphone near the hospital. Someone's tying loose ends. Lorenzo slid the folder toward her, a photo slipping free. Grainy black and white of a man in a raincoat, face obscured, handing an envelope to Paolo outside a dockside bar. Time-stamped 2 days before the collapse. Your shift ends at the hospital tomorrow. I'll have a detail on you. No arguments. We trace that plate at dawn, hit the streets before Greco smells the heat. Sophia's pulse quickened, the push-pull evident in her stance. Independence screaming to walk away, loyalty to Marco anchoring her here. A detail? I'm not hiding. I have patience, the cart. Real life doesn't stop for your shadows. But even as she spoke, doubt crept in. The figure in the tree line replayed in her mind. Phone flashed like a predator's eye. Financial need pressed harder than pride. The Grove's harvest was months off, and Marco's monitors demanded another infusion. She nodded curtly, pocketing the photo. Fine. But I drive. No cages. Lorenzo's lips twitched, a flicker of respect amid the gravel in his tone. Bold as ever. Deal. He poured the last of the wine, the liquid glugging softly into glasses, a brief ritual before the plunge. They clinked, the crystal's chime lost in the rain's patter, sealing an uneasy alliance. As the clock struck 1, his lieutenant buzzed in via radio. Boss, service road clear. But the Fiat's plates pinged. Stolen. Last seen near the Vucheria. Greco's playing ghost. The words hung like smoke, tension coiling anew. Sophia excused herself to a guest room upstairs, the hallway's sconces casting elongated shadows that whispered of unseen watchers. The bed was crisp linen and down, but sleep evaded her, the villa's walls too thick with secrets. Downstairs, she imagined Lorenzo in his study, poring over maps of the docks, shipping lanes marked in red, access codes for warehouse gates scribbled in margins. His code drove him, legacy from a father lost to betrayal, a vow to shield the vulnerable even as ambition warred with prudence. But trust? That was the fracture line. suspicion threading through every alliance. Dawn broke slate gray, the drizzle persisting as a fine mist that beaded on the Mercedes windshield. Sophia slipped into the front seat beside the driver, Lorenzo's compromise, her nurse's scrubs folded in a bag for the hospital shift. Lorenzo rode in the back, his presence a solid weight, phone in hand as he coordinated with Vito. The convoy, 2 sedans flanking them, eased through the gates, tires hissing on wet asphalt. Palermo stirred awake. Fishermen hauling nets at the harbor, the tang of salt and diesel heavy in the air, church bells tolling faintly over the hum of early traffic. They headed for the DMV archives first, a nondescript office in the city's bureaucratic heart, where forged plates could unravel like cheap thread. En route, unease prickled. In the side mirror, a delivery van lagged too consistently, its logo peeling, plausible cover for a tale or just morning rush. Lorenzo noticed, his hand drifting to his belt. Eyes on that van, he murmured to the driver. The radio crackled, Vito's voice, terse. "Boss, Paolo's ghosted. Apartment empty, phone dead. But we found this. Burned manifest in his trash. Matches the warehouse load." Sophia twisted, glimpsing the van swerve into an alley as they turned. False alarm? The archives loomed ahead, a squat building ringed by chain link and security cams, their lenses winking in the mist. Inside, the air was stale with ink and old paper, clerks shuffling files under fluorescent buzz. Lorenzo's name opened doors, literally, a back room where a greased palm produced records. The plate GR47Z traced to a Greco shell company, registered to a ghost address near the docks. But the kicker, last renewal stamped by Paolo's cousin, a low-level clerk with a gambling debt. "Turncoat chain," Lorenzo growled, folding the printout. "Greco's buying loyalty cheap." As they emerged, the mist thickening to fog, Sophia's phone vibrated. A hospital alert, Marco's vitals dipping slightly. "Routine," the message said, but her gut twisted. They piled into the cars, engines growling to life. But as the convoy pulled out, the delivery van reappeared. Closer now, its driver obscured by tinted glass. A horn blared from a cross street, and suddenly brakes screeched, a truck barreling through a red light, clipping the lead sedan in a crunch of metal and steam. Chaos erupted. The convoy halted in a snarl of horns and shouts, the truck's driver fleeing on foot into the fog-shrouded alleys. Lorenzo shoved Sophia down, his body shielding hers as glass shattered nearby. "Ambush!" the driver yelled, drawing a pistol. Bullets? No, just a botched ram, but the intent clear. Scatter them. Isolate the boss. Heart pounding, Sophia scanned the street, spotting the van accelerating away, plates now visible. GR47Z. Stolen anew, or the same ghost? Lorenzo hauled her toward a side door, his grip firm on her arm, protection laced with possession. "Hospital first. Get eyes on Marco. Then we end this." But as sirens wailed in the distance, institutional limits closing in with police response, Sophia wondered, was the truck a diversion for something worse at the hospital, or had Paolo's network already infiltrated deeper, turning their clues into a noose? The fog swallowed the street, leaving only the echo of escape, and the chilling realization that trust, once cracked, might shatter them all. The fog clung to Palermo's streets like a shroud, muting the wail of sirens into a distant, ethereal hum as the battered convoy limped toward the hospital. Sophia Rossi gripped the door handle of the Mercedes, her knuckles white, the acrid scent of scorched rubber and steam invading the cabin through cracked windows. Shards of glass glittered on the leather seats like fallen stars, and Lorenzo De Luca's arm remained a steel band across her chest, his breath steady, but his eyes scanning the mirrors with predatory focus. The lead sedan trailed, its fender crumpled, driver barking coordinates into the radio amid the crunch of debris under tires. No shots fired, just a ramming truck that had peeled away into the mist. But the message was etched in twisted metal. Greco's reach extended further than shadowed docks. probing for cracks in DeLuca's armor. "Stay low," Lorenzo murmured, his voice a gravelly anchor amid the chaos. The hospital loomed ahead, its brutalist facade a gray monolith under sodium lights that pierced the haze like accusatory fingers. Emergency bays buzzed with the night's toll. Ambulances idling, their red flashes pulsing against the fog, the sharp tang of disinfectant and diesel hanging heavy. Sophia's pulse thrummed in her ears, Marco's dipping vitals replaying like a warning siren. Was the ambush a feint, drawing them here to expose a vulnerability? Her independence chafed against his protection, a push-pull that left her breathless. She was no pawn, yet the web tightened with every turn. They pulled into the staff lot, security detail fanning out like wolves. 2 men sweeping the perimeter, earpieces crackling with updates. Lorenzo killed the engine, his hand lingering on her shoulder, possessive yet restrained by that internal code. Shield the innocent, even if it meant war with his own instincts. Vito's en route with the plate trace. You check on Marco. I'll handle the shadows. His gaze held hers, dark and unyielding, revealing the fracture. Trust eroded by betrayal's echo, ambition clashing with the prudence that had kept him alive this long. Sophia nodded, slipping from the car into the chill mist, her scrubs rustling softly. The hospital's automatic doors whooshed open, admitting her to the familiar antiseptic embrace. Beeping monitors, the low murmur of nurses' chatter, fluorescent lights humming overhead like a swarm of indifferent insects. She bypassed the desk, flashing her badge to a colleague who eyed the convoy outside with raised brows. "Rough night?" the woman asked, voice laced with Palermo's wry edge. "You have no idea," Sophia replied, forcing a tight smile as she hurried down the corridor. Marco's room was on the 3rd floor, past the neurology ward where shadows pooled in corners, the air thick with the metallic whisper of oxygen lines. Her keycard beeped at the door, granting access to the dim space. Monitors glowing green, the ventilator's rhythmic whoosh, a mechanical lullaby. Marco lay unchanged, his face slack under the pallor of prolonged sleep, IV drips tracing lazy paths along his arm. She checked the chart. Vitals stabilized, no anomalies logged. Relief washed over her, brief as a passing cloud, but unease lingered. The room felt off, the air slightly stale, as if a window had been cracked too long. Adjusting his blanket, Sophia's fingers brushed a folded note tucked under the pillow, handwritten, scrawled in hasty ink. "Stop digging, or he wakes up for good." Her blood iced, the paper crumpling in her fist. Not hospital staff. The handwriting was blocky, masculine, smudged with what smelled faintly of dockside tar. A threat, planted during the vitals dip. Human error or deliberate sabotage? She pocketed it, heart racing, and stepped into the hall, only to freeze. A janitor mopping the far end, his cart's wheels squeaking unnaturally slow, cap pulled low over eyes that flicked toward her door. "Lorenzo," she whispered into her phone, voice hushed as she backed toward the nurse's station. Footsteps echoed behind her, too deliberate for a casual shift change. The janitor straightened, abandoning the mop, his hand dipping into a pocket. Not a weapon, but a phone, screen lighting his face. A burner, thumb hovering over send. Behavioral tell, the subtle glance at Marco's door, the cart positioned to block the camera angle. Compromised guard rotation, or an infiltrator posing as maintenance? Before she could call out, the lights flickered. A blackout, plunging the ward into strobing emergency red. Alarms blared, a cacophony of panic as patients stirred and staff scrambled. Sophia bolted for the stairwell, the note burning in her pocket. But the janitor lunged, grabbing her wrist with a grip like iron. "Rossi!" he hissed, breath reeking of cheap cigarettes. "Greco says hello. Your brother's next if DeLuca doesn't back off the manifests." She twisted free, nurse's training fueling a sharp elbow to his gut, sending him staggering into a crash cart that toppled with a metallic clang. Adrenaline surged, autonomy fueling her flight down the dim hall, red lights casting bloody hues on white walls. Doors jammed in the chaos, power outage locking electronics, a natural surge from the storm's aftermath, or tampered circuits. Shouts erupted. "Code Black! Intruder!" Her phone buzzed. "Lorenzo. Where are you? Perimeter breached." Bursting into the lobby, Sophia collided with his chest, his arms encircling her instinctively, the scent of rain and gun oil enveloping her. "Note in Marco's room," she gasped, thrusting it into his hand. "Janitor. Greco's man. He knew my name." Lorenzo's face hardened, scanning the milling crowd as his men converged, radios buzzing with confirmations. The blackout traced to a cutbreaker in the basement, wires snipped clean. No fire, but the environment turned hazardous. Exits clogged with gurneys, false alarms drawing police sirens closer. "Paolo's network," he growled, pocketing the note. "The clerk's cousin works maintenance here. Bought off." His eyes met hers, the possessiveness flaring amid the red glow. Protection offered, but laced with the cost of her entanglement. Loyalty tested by the betrayal closing in. They pushed toward the exit, Vito materializing with an escort detail. But as the doors parted to the fog-shrouded lot, headlights pierced the mist. A black SUV idling at the curb, engine purring like a threat. Not theirs. Plates obscured, driver obscured further by the haze. Lorenzo shoved Sophia behind him, hand on his belt, the air electric with rising tension. Was it extraction? Or the real ambush waiting in the shadows? Greco's rivals staging a grab, or an inside turncoat sealing the trap? The SUV's door cracked open, a silhouette emerging, and in that suspended beat, Sophia wondered if the Ledger's secrets would bury them before dawn broke the fog. The fog swirled like smoke from a hidden fire as the hospital doors hissed open, spilling Sophia and Lorenzo into the staff lot's dim glow. The black SUV loomed at the curb, its engine a low growl that cut through the muffled chaos behind them. Sirens wailing faintly, the blackout's red strobes pulsing through the glass like a dying heartbeat. Lorenzo's body tensed against hers, his hand hovering near the Beretta concealed at his belt, the damp mist beating on his collar and carrying the sharp scent of wet concrete and exhaust. Sophia's breath came in shallow bursts, the crumpled note from Marco's room still warm in her pocket, its threat echoing. "Stop digging, or he wakes up for good." The janitor's grip lingered in her mind, his cigarette-stale breath a reminder of how close the shadows had crept. "Get back," Lorenzo ordered, voice a gravel whisper, shoving her toward the Mercedes as his men fanned out, pistols drawn low. Vito, broad-shouldered and scarred from a dockside brawl years back, flanked him, radio crackling with perimeter updates. "Clear on east side, boss. No tails yet." But the SUV's door swung wider, a figure stepping out, tall, hooded, hands raised empty. Not Greco's brute. The posture was too deliberate, almost signaling. "DeLuca," the man called, voice muffled by the fog, laced with a northern accent that didn't fit Palermo's streets. "We need to talk. About Paolo." Lorenzo froze, eyes narrowing to slits, the push-pull of suspicion warring with the lure of a lead. Paolo, the ghosted guard, the linchpin in the warehouse collapse. His betrayal, a festering wound in the empire Lorenzo had forged from his father's ashes. Legacy demanded answers. No loose ends, no innocents like Marco paying for the greed of turncoats. But trust? That was a luxury eroded by years of institutional blind eyes and rival whispers. "Who sent you?" he demanded, stepping forward, rain-slicked asphalt squelching under his loafers. Sophia hovered at the car's edge, autonomy flaring. She wasn't hiding, not while Marco's life hung on these threads. But fear rooted her, the hospital's sodium lights casting long shadows that danced like intruders. The figure lowered his hood slightly, revealing a face etched with stubble and caution. Mid-40s, eyes darting to the convoy's crumpled lead car. Name's Enzo, ex-Greco runner. Paolo reached out. Burner call last night. Said he had proof, a ledger from the collapse. Wanted out, clean. But they got to him first. He tossed a small drive from his pocket, glinting as it skittered across the pavement. Vito snatched it, scanning it under a flashlight beam. Encrypted files, timestamps matching the manifest discrepancies. Truck plates, access codes for the warehouse gates. Greco's rerouting your olive shipments, contraband underneath. Paolo hid it in a safe house off Via Roma. But if you're tailed... Sophia's pulse spiked, piecing it with the hospital note. The janitor's phone, the cutbreaker. Human error in the storm's wake, or a coordinated hit. "Why now?" she interjected, stepping beside Lorenzo, her voice steady despite the chill seeping through her scrubs. "If Paolo's dead, this could be a trap. Lure you in, finish what the truck started." The air thickened with tension, distant thunder rumbling like an approaching convoy, the scent of brine from the nearby harbor mingling with the fog's musty veil. Lorenzo caught her eye, a flicker of respect amid the possessiveness, her independence a spark that both irked and drew him, clashing with his code to shield what he'd claimed as his. No graphic takedowns, just calculated moves. Protect the vulnerable. Honor the vow etched by his father's accident, a betrayal that had left him rebuilding from ruins. He nodded to Enzo. "Drive. We'll follow. One wrong turn. You're done." The SUV peeled away, tires hissing into the mist, and the convoy reformed, Mercedes in pursuit, sedans boxing them in. Sophia slid into the back seat beside Lorenzo, the leather creaking under their weight, engine roaring to life as they plunged into Palermo's labyrinthine alleys. The chase unfolded in fragmented glimpses. Narrow streets slick with rain, Vespas scattering like startled birds, the hum of security radios underscoring clipped exchanges. Eyes on the SUV, no tails. Vito reported from the lead car, but Sophia spotted it in the side mirror. A motorcycle weaving too close. Rider hunched against the drizzle, helmet visor reflecting the headlights like a blank stare. Surveillance? Or paranoia born of the night's fractures? Lorenzo's thigh pressed against hers in the tight space, a silent anchor. His hand brushing her knee, protection laced with the unspoken pull of their alliance. Loyalty tested against the fear of deeper betrayal. They veered toward Via Roma, the district's pulse quickening. Luxury storefronts shuttered for the night, the faint sizzle of late-night arancini vendors cutting through the damp air. The safe house was a nondescript apartment above a pharmacy, its windows dark, iron balconies dripping condensation. Enzo parked in a shadowed alley, signaling them up a rear stairwell that smelled of garlic and mildew, steps creaking under their cautious ascent. Inside, the space was sparse. Faded wallpaper, a single bulb swinging from the ceiling, casting jittery light over a scarred wooden table. Paolo's ledger lay open there, pages filled with discrete entries, shipping manifests altered in pencil, guard rotations circled, a partial access code for the dock's security system. He was scared, Enzo said, flipping to a dog-eared section. Noted the collapse. Beams tampered, not failed. Greco's engineer signed off, but Paolo saw the payoffs. Wanted immunity, your word. Lorenzo scanned the pages, jaw tightening. The firelight from a nearby lamp flickering across his face like resolve hardening. My word's iron, but this code, it's for the main warehouse, if Greco's using it. His voice trailed, the implication heavy. Infiltration complete, rivals poised to strike his core operations. Sophia traced a line. Marco's name again, linked to a witness payout rerouted to the janitor's alias. The hospital blackout, she murmured. Paolo must have tipped them. But why plant the note? To scare me off or draw you here? Enzo shifted uneasily, the room's air growing stifling. Paolo's gone, dumped in the harbor this morning per whispers. This was his insurance. But as Lorenzo pocketed the ledger, a floorboard groaned in the hall outside, too deliberate for settling wood. The motorcycle's engine revved below, headlights sweeping the alley like a search beam. Betrayal's echo. Had Enzo played them, staging this as a Greco diversion? Or was it an inside man, Paolo's network closing the loop? Lorenzo drew his Beretta, motioning Sofia behind the table, his body a shield once more. Out the back, now. They burst onto a fire escape, rain pelting their faces as shots cracked the night, not aimed wild, but suppressive, splintering the doorframe. The escape turned hazardous. Slick rungs, fog obscuring the drop to the alley below, jammed gate at the bottom from rust and neglect. Vito's voice buzzed urgently. "Boss, inbound. 2 cars, Greco plates, ambush." Heart slamming, Sofia descended after Lorenzo, the metal groaning under her weight, autonomy fueling her grip even as his hand steadied her waist, possessiveness yielding to shared peril. They hit the ground running, convoy engines roaring around the corner, but the motorcycle blocked the exit, rider dismounting with a glint of steel. Climax loomed in the downpour, confrontation or evasion, the ledger's secrets their only edge. As bullets pinged off brick, Sofia wondered. Had Enzo been the true turncoat? Or was the real threat the code itself, unlocking a war that would cost more than ledgers and lives? If this tale already has you hooked, hit the like button. It helps us bring more hidden stories to light. The rain hammered the fire escape like 1,000 frantic drums, turning the metal rungs into slick traps that threatened to send Sofia tumbling into the abyss below. She gripped the railing with numb fingers, her scrubs soaked through, the chill biting deeper than the Palermo fog that swallowed the alley's end. Lorenzo De Luca moved ahead of her, his broad frame a silhouette against the stuttering flash of distant headlights. Beretta raised in a steady 2-handed grip. The ledger burned in his jacket pocket, its pages heavy with the weight of betrayal, Paolo's final accounting, access codes that could unravel his docs like a house of cards. Shots cracked from the safe house window above, splintering brick and sending chips flying like shrapnel. But they were wild, suppressive fire meant to pin, not kill. Greco's play. Flush them out, isolate the boss in the labyrinth of backstreets where cops rarely ventured. "Down, now!" Lorenzo barked over the din, his voice cutting through the storm like a blade. Sofia's foot slipped on the final rung, her knee jarring against the frame, but his free hand shot out, hauling her to solid ground with a force that bruised yet steadied. The alley reeked of overflowing dumpsters, rotting fish from the nearby market mingling with the sharp ozone of wet pavement, and the motorcycle's engine revved closer, its rider circling like a shark scenting blood. No helmet now. The face emerged from the shadows, gaunt and familiar. The hospital janitor, his cheap jacket plastered to a frame wiry with desperation. In his hand, not a gun, but a tire iron glinting under a sodium street lamp, swung low for a disabling blow. Sofia's breath hitched, the note from Marco's room flashing in her mind. "Stop digging." "You," she spat, backing against the wall, the rough stucco scraping her palms. Autonomy surged through the fear. She wouldn't cower, not after piecing the clues, the cut-breaker, the planted threat, all threads leading to this turncoat's greedy hands. Lorenzo stepped between them, pistol leveled, the rain tracing rivulets down his face that masked the tick of rage at his jaw. "Paolo's cousin," he growled, recognition dawning from the ledger's margins. "Gambling debts paid by Greco. How much for the hospital hit?" The janitor, Rico his badge had read, hesitated, tire iron quivering, eyes darting to the alley's mouth where the ambush car's tires screeched to a halt, blocking escape. Headlights pierced the downpour, illuminating puddles that reflected the chaos like shattered mirrors. "Enough to bury you both," Rico snarled, lunging forward with a swing that whistled through the air. Lorenzo sidestepped, fluid as a dockside enforcer, his boot connecting with Rico's knee in a crunch that dropped the man howling. No fatal shot. Lorenzo's code held. No innocence, but traitors earned mercy's edge, a beat to spill before the fall. Vito's convoy burst around the corner, sedans fishtailing on the slick asphalt, their bumpers scraping walls as they rammed the Greco vehicles in a symphony of grinding metal and shattering glass. Engines roared, doors slamming like thunderclaps. Lorenzo's men spilling out with disciplined fury, pistols barking controlled bursts to disable tires, not men. The environment turned lethal. A parked Vespa toppled in the fray, spilling gasoline that ignited from a stray spark, flames licking up a wall in a whoosh of heat and acrid smoke. Blackout conditions without the power failure. Fog and fire blurring lines, jammed alley serving as a natural choke point. "Get her out!" Lorenzo shouted to Vito, who grabbed Sophia's arm, pulling her toward the Mercedes as she twisted for a final glance. Rico scrambled up, clutching his leg, but Enzo emerged from the safe house's rear door, hands up, face pale under the firelight. "I swear, boss, not me. Paolo's drive was real. Greco's got the full ledger. They're moving on the docks tonight." His words tumbled out, laced with the fear of a man who'd gambled on the wrong horse. Lorenzo holstered his weapon, nodding sharply, trust suspended, but the lead too hot to discard. "Drive him. Interrogate later." The convoy reformed in the melee, sedans peeling away with squealing tires, the Mercedes surging forward as bullets pinged off the rear fender. Inside the car, Sophia pressed against the door, the leather seat cold against her wet clothes, heart pounding in sync with the wiper's frantic swipe. Lorenzo slid in beside her, the door slamming shut like a vault, his presence a wall against the rear view's chaos. Greco cars giving chase, but faltering as Vito's men laid down covering fire. "The code in the ledger," she said, voice breathless, wiping rain from her eyes. "It's for the main gate, if they're using it." The implication hung. Infiltration complete, rivals poised to hijack shipments under cover of the storm, turning olive oil crates into smuggling gold. Lorenzo's hand found hers, gripping tight. Not possession now, but alliance forged in the fire's glow, his code bending to include her independence in the vow. "They won't. We hit the docks first, reroute my guards, jam their access." His phone buzzed, Lieutenant's voice crackling. "Boss, warehouse cams show movement, trucks inbound, plates matching the manifests. Paolo's network's deep, one of our own rotated in last week. Behavioral slip I missed." Betrayal's sting deepened, human error amplified by greed. A guard's offhand comment, a bought lunch, unraveling the web. The Mercedes barreled toward the harbor, Palermo's waterfront unfolding in glimpses, cranes silhouetted against the roiling sea, the hum of generators underscoring the crash of waves on concrete piers. Docks stretched like iron veins, warehouses hulking shadows stacked with containers that hid more than fruit. Tension coiled as they approached the gate, floodlights sweeping the perimeter like watchful eyes, the air thick with salt, diesel, and the faint rot of beached kelp. Vito's car pulled ahead, ramming the barrier open in a spark of metal. But inside, alarms blared. A staged diversion? Lights flickered, not from storm, but tampered relays, plunging sections into hazardous dark where footsteps echoed from unseen corners. Sophia scanned the shadows, spotting a figure near a loading bay, cap low, clipboard in hand, but the gate wrong, too hurried for routine. "There! Guard rotation's off," she whispered, nurse's eye catching the tell, sweat beading unnaturally, hand twitching toward a pocket. Lorenzo nodded, radioing the alert, but as their cars screeched to a halt, a forklift lurched from the gloom, headlights blinding, barreling straight for the Mercedes in a botched or deliberate charge. Brakes locked, tires smoking, the world tilted in a grind of collision that spun them toward the water's edge. Had the inside man triggered it, or was Greco's convoy already extracting the cargo, leaving them to drown in the tide of their own pursuit? The sea's roar swelled, threatening to swallow the answer whole. The Mercedes shuddered under the impact, its front fender crumpling against the forklift's reinforced prongs like tin foil, the jolt hurling Sophia forward against the seatbelt with a snap that bruised her ribs. Metal groaned in protest, the engine coughing a final sputter as the car skidded sideways, tires carving wet furrows in the dockside gravel. The sea's brine assaulted her nostrils, sharp and unforgiving, mingling with the acrid bite of leaking radiator fluid that pooled beneath them. Waves slapped the concrete piers nearby, their rhythm a mocking counterpoint to the chaos. Cranes looming like skeletal guardians, containers stacked in towering rows that hid the harbor's underbelly of contraband and deceit. Lorenzo De Luca unbuckled in a fluid motion, his door wrenching open with a metallic screech, Beretta already in hand as he scanned the gloom. The warehouse lights flickered erratically, tampered relays casting strobe-like shadows that turned the loading bay into a disorienting maze. Vito, flank left. "Secure the gate!" he barked into his radio, voice steady amid the rising din of shouts and revving engines. Sophia's door stuck, the frame warped from the hit. She kicked it free, spilling onto the damp asphalt, her knee throbbing from the earlier slip, but ignored in the adrenaline surge. The guard she'd spotted, the one with the twitchy hands, bolted toward a shadowed crane, clipboard abandoned, his silhouette merging with the fog rolling off the Tyrrhenian. No time for pursuit. Greco's trucks rumbled from the warehouse depths, headlights piercing the dark like accusatory beams, tires crunching over manifests scattered like confetti. 3 vehicles, heavy with illicit cargo, crates of olives masking cigarettes and worse, rerouted via Paulo's codes. The inside man was theirs. The rotated guard, bought with a promise of easy money, his behavioral slip a late-night call traced to a burner near the hospital. Human error amplified by greed, institutional limits letting it fester until now. Sophia scrambled to her feet, grabbing a fallen flashlight from the gravel, its beam cutting through the mist to reveal the forklift's operator fleeing toward the water, cap askew, revealing Rico's cousin, eyes wild with the cornered rat's panic. "Stop!" she yelled, voice cracking over the waves. But he vanished behind a container stack, the environment turning treacherous. Puddles reflecting sodium lights, slick as ice, with the sea's edge mere feet away, ready to claim any who slipped. Lorenzo's men converged, pistols leveled in controlled arcs, forcing the Greco trucks to brake in a squeal of brakes and gravel spray. Vito's sedan blocked the exit, a makeshift barricade that turned the bay into a choke point, engines idling like growling beasts. No wild shootout, just precise takedowns, tires shredded by warning shots, drivers raising hands in surrender as the rain intensified, drumming on metal roofs like impatient fingers. Lorenzo advanced on the lead truck, ledger in one hand, gun in the other, his code a steel thread holding back the fury. No innocents harmed, but traitors exposed. "Out. Hands where I see them." The driver complied, face paling under the flashlight's glare, a shipping manifest tumbling from the cab. Discrepancies circled in the same ink as Paulo's notes. "Greco's orders," the man muttered, voice trembling. "The collapse was payback. Your witness, Rossi, saw too much. We planted the note to scare her off, but De Luca's sniffing." Sophia caught up, beam steady on the man's face, piecing the final threads, the janitor's grab, the blackout, the forklift charge, all diversions to cover the cargo grab, organized down to the jammed camera angles and false guard rotations. But victory's cost loomed. Sirens wailed in the distance, police drawn by the staged noise, exposure a ticking bomb. One of Lorenzo's men shouted from the warehouse, "Boss, injured!" The inside guard slipped, twisted ankle on the catwalk. Not fatal, but a limp reminder. Sacrifice in the ranks, loyalty tested and holding, barely. The Greco crew disarmed, zip-tied against a container wall, their operation crumbling under the weight of evidence, drives, ledgers, manifests, linking back to the shell company. Enzo, dragged from the SUV by Vito, spilled the rest under duress, A partial confession, his role as reluctant courier for Paolo's insurance, fear of Greco's retaliation flipping him to De Luca's side. No easy win. The dock's security breach would draw heat, shipments delayed, rivals regrouping in the shadows. Lorenzo holstered his weapon, turning to Sofia as the rain eased to a drizzle, the sea's murmur softening to a hush. His eyes met hers, the possessiveness yielding to something deeper. Trust forged in the peril, her independence a mirror to his restrained power. "You all right?" he asked, voice low, hand brushing her arm where the seatbelt had chafed, a touch of protection, not claim. She nodded, ribs aching, but the pain grounded her. Marco's safe, that's what matters. The realization settled. The true treasure wasn't the seized cargo or dismantled network, but this. Protection earned through shared risk. Trust blooming from suspicion's ashes. No grand spoils. The Empire's ledgers would rebuild. But the bond between them, fragile yet unbreakable, outshone the gold. Dawn crept over the horizon, painting the harbor in muted pinks and grays, the fog lifting like a veil torn away. Police arrived in a convoy of flashing blues, institutional gears grinding into motion. Statements taken, evidence bagged, the warehouse secured under joint watch. Marco's bills. Lorenzo's quiet word to a contact ensured coverage, no strings beyond the alliance they'd built. Sofia returned to the hospital as the sun rose, finding her brother stirring slightly under the monitor's steady beep. A twitch of fingers, hope's first whisper, credited to rest and care, not miracles. Weeks blurred into routine. The cart thrived under Vito's subtle protection, sweets selling brisker amid whispers of the saved sister. Lorenzo's world pulled her in edges, dinners in the villa overlooking the sea, conversations laced with coded plans, his code intertwining with her ethics. No possession. Autonomy respected, but loyalty a chosen chain, stronger than fear. Betrayal's scars faded, replaced by memory's warmth. The storm's fury, the ledger's secrets, the dockside stand that redefined family. Not blood alone, but forged in Palermo's unforgiving streets. In the quiet of a sunlit piazza, Sofia arranged her trays, the scent of fresh cannoli rising like an offering. Lorenzo watched from afar, no longer the hawk, but a partner in the shadows. The adventure's echo lingered, power's raw edge dulled by what endured. Trust, sacrifice, and the found family that outlasted empires. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of loyalty, danger, and found family. See you in the next story.